Hi, I'm Sean Stone. Join me today for a spiritual catalyst here on Buzzsaw.
Central Intelligence Agency.
It was described by witnesses as
Joining me today is the giggling guide, or the spiritual catalyst herself, Teal Swan, who's more than 100,000 subscribers know her as the host of Ask Teal, and she's built quite a following based on her spiritual insights and abilities. And she's joining us to talk about the post-2012 world and what to expect and what to ask from life in order to create a better reality. So, Teal, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's wonderful.
Absolutely. Where are you normally based?
I'm in Park City, Utah.
In Utah?
Yeah.
How do you find it there? I mean, I would think that with the kind of work that you're doing, you would be placed maybe in places like Los Angeles, where there's a lot of New Age community. There's, New Mexico and Sedona and places like this. What draws you to Park City?
Skiing.
Well, only half the year.
You thought it was going to be a complicated answer, didn't you?
Well, that's for 6 months, let's say, or
Yeah,
4
no.
months of the year.
I love skiing, and when it comes to snow, there's really nowhere else that's better than that. But
Yeah.
what's interesting about the mountains there also is that there's so much like silver that's actually in those mountains that it creates this very amazing upwelling of energy. So for those of us that are spiritual, it's a little bit of an energy zone.
But you've had a lot of bad experiences in Utah from
Lots.
your history,
Yes.
going back to childhood and satanic ritual abuse.
Yes.
Right. Do you think that were you targeted because you had certain abilities?
Yes.
You felt that was the reason for it? It wasn't to do with just a generational thing or just because there were guys that are evil that do horrible things to kids.
Well, from what I understand, I was directly targeted because of these extrasensory abilities that I came in with. Obviously, as a child, you don't really know like what you're supposed to be saying versus what's reality for you. When you get socialized, you learn more what to say and what not to say.
Right.
So when I was younger, I would start to tell people about their auras or about extraterrestrials, these other various topics which are taboo, and it was not well received within that community, which is highly Latter-day Saint. It's Mormon up there in Utah. So I got myself put on the radars as this is not a normal kid. Now, when it comes to the Mormon religion, that would have been okay. Not really comfortable because I was super ostracized in the community, but it was a turn the other cheek type of philosophy. But the thing about the Mormon church is that there's so many splinter groups that come off of it. Of course, the FLDS church, which you've probably heard about, is one of those splinter
What's
groups.
that for? FLDS?
I think Fundamental Latter-day Saints is what they call them. They're the ones that believe in polygamy. So there's another splinter group that's called the Blood Covenant, and more so than the polygamy aspect of Mormonism, they're really in love with the idea of blood atonement, which is the idea that there are some sins which can't be atoned for by the death of Christ and have to be atoned for by the death of man. So Brigham Young was a really famous prophet for the Mormon church, and he would talk a lot about the fact that if your neighbor, very famous pulpit speech, if your neighbor committed adultery, if you love him, you will kill him.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's sort of...
It sounds more like Baal worship or some, right? So one of these
Yeah.
Arcane forms of what we call Satanism,
Yeah.
as opposed to Christianity.
If only it had died out with history.
And so what were you exposed to?
So because of my abilities, they believed that, well, Mormon church believes that priesthood, these powers that I came in with, can only come directly from men, or God, sorry, to Joseph Smith to men. And so the fact that I was a woman made it so that these abilities had to be a gift of the devil. So they
What did you
believed...
demonstrate at that point?
What kind of stuff was I demonstrating?
Yeah, what had you demonstrated to them that made them certain that you had?
Things like laying my hands on people and healing them. Things like being able to talk to dead spirits. Yeah, those are the two main things which really set off bells and whistles, because that's considered part of the power of priesthood. Mm-hmm. So the Mormons try to avoid that, turn the other cheek, but some of these cults, like the Blood Covenant, they believe that it's their job to rid the earth of evil. And so they believe that this body that you're looking at before you was taken over by a demon, and that if they torture it enough, then the demon will leave.
I see.
Yeah, and so that's one part, part one. Part two is that the Blood Covenant has infiltrated satanic groups in the area to hold counter rituals. So if you ever look at the satanic calendar, it's like the whole year is covered with all of these holidays.
Sure.
And so the Blood Covenant will hold counter rituals for every ritual that's held by the satanic group. So they attend them in secret, pretending to be part of them, and then take those rituals back so that they can throw the power back to Christ. So it's like this undercover, super seedy, very dark thing that's going on, unbeknownst to most people in the area.
Right. So it wasn't satanic ritual abuse, it was more like it was
both.
insane Christian ritual abuse.
It was both.
Right.
Because I was the one that was dragged between them. And they were loving that. They were loving the fact that they could use this thing. Satanic people they also recognized my abilities, but they saw that as their access to the underworld. So they were worshiping what I could do. So I'm being drugged back and forth between the group who saw me as evil and the group who saw me as their answer and their ticket to whatever power exists.
And how were you able to survive that emotionally?
I don't know some days. A lot of it sort of organically came as a result of having to survive, I have to say. It's like, what are you going to do with yourself when you're put in situations like the one? I guess I could talk about my awakening experience if you'd like.
Sure, sure.
Okay. So when I was a teenager, the guy who was my keeper, that's what they call it, it's someone who's completely in charge of you within the group, had this hole in his backyard made for me. It was about like a 4-foot by 3-foot hole. And he used to hog tie my ankles and arms together and then put me down inside this hole. And I had no idea how long I'd be down there. So I had no idea whether he would kill me afterwards or set me free. So it was like one of those scenarios where it's absolute torture because obviously that's a survival situation. But I started to notice that if my attention was placed on, like, the ants, an ant really caused my awakening. I would watch the ants crawl around in this hole and crawl around all of these roots that were sticking out of the hole. And I watched as they didn't really resist the roots, they just sort of went around them. That was number one, that's sort of the art of allowing, right? But then I noticed this other thing, which was that if I was focusing on the ants, I started to feel emotional relief, whereas if I was focusing on what might have happened to me 10 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour in advance, I was miserable.
Right, because you're stuck in a state of uncertainty and
Oh,
worry
yeah.
and fear.
So like a typical scientist would say, well, that's just coping behavior, but really it's like the foundation of a lot of what I teach today is based on that idea that you can dictate how you feel based on what you're focusing your attention on.
Sure.
And it was absolutely amazing and liberating for me.
It's an amazing insight to have at a young age. The question I have is, in terms of this abuse, did your family allow it? What was their responsibility and motive in this?
Well, this is where it gets really, everybody wants to know where the hell were your parents. But,
well, that's obviously the case. I mean, oftentimes there's abuse that occurs, and the question always is, well, where were the parents? And I can't believe, the parents would allow it or turn a blind eye.
Well, if my parents had noticed what was going on, they definitely wouldn't have turned a blind eye. They weren't negligent parents in that type of a sense, but the issue is that there was a major emotional rift between me and my family. They didn't, because of the extrasensory stuff, I think that's part of it, and my personality in general, they didn't relate to me very much, and so I think they loved me but didn't know how to love me, and that created this major gap, which was capitalized on by this man who was part of the cult group, who was also, he had multiple personality disorder, and he was a genuine sociopath. So sociopaths are always looking for ways to take advantage. Now, he ended up infiltrating the family because he knew my parents loosely throughout the town, and he ended up convincing them that he knew everything about my abilities. So here I am struggling with them. It's not fun to be extrasensory, I'll just tell you that. So it's not fun to be extrasensory. I didn't know how to live with it. Here's this guy who's saying, here, I have the answers. And my parents going, at least someone does. So they trusted him with me as a mentor. And every time I would get sicker and sicker, like that's what happens when you're going through this type of a scenario. You just get more mentally ill, and you get more breakthrough symptoms, more anxiety, more physical ailments. And they would watch that happen, and then he would come in each time and say, okay, I can help even more. And so it was like they were trusting him to help me with the very thing he was doing to me. And I couldn't say anything, of course, because he had threatened through elaborate mind control techniques, of course, he used like electroshocks. That was his favorite modality, to explain in detail and walk me through very detailed visualizations about what would happen to my family, each member of my family, if I had said anything about our interaction with each other.
Right. It sounds almost like he'd been trained in some kind of MK Ultra, like mind control technique, because of the way that he knew how to use electroshock, for example, for that purpose.
He was very sloppy at it.
But
there was someone who was teaching him, yes.
Was there a government connection to it beyond
I didn't see a government connection, but there was a university connection. The person who was teaching him mind control techniques, who did work with him and me one-on-one to try to perpetrate or bond me to him, was actually a professor of neurology.
At which university was it?
Idaho State.
And that's a state university, so that again indicates state funds, which probably means some kind of government allowance, if not operation, going on. So then this, what was the breaking point when you actually broke free of his control?
It's super gruesome. I'll try to tone it down, basically. I had suggested leaving, and that's not allowed within the group. So he caught wind of my plan to try to go on a trip and didn't like that idea. And so he tried to convince me that I had done something, committed a crime that I hadn't committed. But he was using ketamine on me. He was a veterinarian, so he had access to all of those medications. And so he was using ketamine, which is typically a medicine you put cats to sleep with for routine operations. And I had been having anxiety attacks a lot, which is what you see. Like, the more that you get tortured, they see these breakthrough symptoms, they call them, where even the mind control that they're doing isn't working, and so the symptoms of post-traumatic stress start to leak through. So one of those is severe anxiety attacks. You just start not being able to really function in the day-to-day world. And so he had given me droppers full of ketamine to take and put on my pulse points. I'd been doing that, and so he didn't account for the way that I would acclimatize to the drug. As a result, he misdosed me. I was supposed to lose consciousness, but I didn't lose consciousness. And because I didn't lose consciousness, when he told me that I had done something that I didn't do, I remembered. And I had no context for that. It was like, why is this guy suddenly telling me that I did something that I didn't do? What does that mean for everything else that he said to me? And it didn't feel good. A lot of people would say, wow, that must be liberating, but it wasn't liberating at all, because I was under complete control at that point. And it's like when your reality collapses, you're left with nothing. So I was sitting there in the woods with him during this elaborate ritual, just losing it emotionally. But somewhere inside me, I had this impulse to run away from the group. I wasn't planning on leaving permanently, it was just an impulse. And I ended up getting in my car and driving to the only safe place that I knew, which was this boy I had only met twice. I broke into his house because he wasn't home, and it wasn't a good scenario, because, I mean, here's my reality collapsing. I'm going, should I go home? Maybe I should just turn the car back. No, I don't want to. Yes, I do want to. No, I don't want to. And so he ended up coming back, and now he works with me, which is the ironic part. He helped me escape.
How do you mean?
Well, basically, when I started telling him the stuff that I had been going through, he was like, don't leave, just don't go home. And I was still planning on going back home eventually, because it was not allowed not to go home. But he was treating me so nicely, which I was not used to at all at that point, that I just stayed one day, and then I stayed 2 days, then I stayed 3 days, and then I really didn't want to go home. And so since then, it's been 11 years since then. We've just been going from house to house, creating a safe little environment, now creating this huge public career together.
You mean the boy who you went to?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I thought you meant initially your original abductor, captor, which would be totally different story. So so basically the point is that the captor had put you in a position where mentally of normalizing it, making it feel like this is a normal existence, and this is fine, because not fine, but in a certain way you allow it because you don't know any better.
Oh yeah, I think most people don't understand that about children, but they really should.
Right.
Whatever you go through as a child is normal to you.
Mm-hmm.
That means, I mean, the person who grows up digging out of garbage cans in India is going to think that's normal.
Exactly, and that's why these ritual abuse things can go on generationally.
Yes.
You oftentimes hear stories of
They most often
the
do.
mother who's been raped or abused by her father or her uncle, and then she
Yes.
allows her daughter
Yep.
to have the same experience because that's to her normal,
Yes.
right? So it's very interesting about how the psyche works. Have you, was that one of your first, or one of your interests has been to help victims of this kind of ritual abuse?
You know, that desire is just now starting, because I was planning on giving people that background so that they would understand, look, I've done this so you can do it too. But when I started coming out with my past, it's like now I've become sort of the poster child for ritual abuse, because it's very rare for people to come forward, like super rare.
Mm-hmm.
So now that I've become so public, people are now like, yes, now I'm the one that's getting hired for all of this, and now I'm getting the emails from women just like me who are like, this is what I went through. I could never talk about it, but the fact that you're talking about it makes me feel like, you know, somebody's finally going to know.
Right.
So now, yeah, it's a major thing for me.
Yeah, no, that's important. In terms of the overall satanic structure, I mean, many people have talked about this. You know, people, Arizona Wilder, you know, whether or not, how credible her story is. I mean, she came forward with similar stories, although dealing with much higher level people,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then you get, you know, guys like David Icke, but many others who will tell you about the overall ritual abuse that goes on at very high levels
Mm-hmm.
of power, right? You have the Franklin scandal, right, which implicated people even like George Bush Sr. And, you know, knowing that this culture of pedophilia exists, right? It's been proven in places like England. You
Yeah.
know, it's alleged here, and you know, you've had your own experiences of it. What are we dealing with here? Is this a belief structure based in a satanic outlook because it's generationally been imposed upon people, or are we dealing with basically people that are sociopaths in positions of power that really do believe that the devil rules the world?
I think it's both, but here's the thing that people need to understand the most about satanic abuse. These people who are in these positions aren't hailing Satan as the number one power, because the number one principle in satanic religion is no God but thyself.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's attractive to sociopaths. So when you look at these high-powered positions in government, high-powered positions in careers, you've got power-hungry people already. Now you've got a belief system that supports the fact that you can become not just a god in your career, but a god here on earth.
Yes.
Of course that's attractive.
Yes. Yes, and I've heard that also from some very powerful families, people in very powerful families who exactly say that, you know, there is no God, I am God. And to understand our connection to God is one thing,
Yep.
right? The idea of God being within all of us is one thing, but to worship but to still worship a higher power
Yes.
is important, I believe, as opposed to, like you're saying, where these guys believe, no, I am God, so I can do whatever I want. That kind of Crowleyan, do what you will, without having the understanding of responsibility, of laws, of rules that say there are certain things that are abuses of our power, right?
If I had my way, worship would be done away with completely. What I'm interested in is teaching people that they have this connection, that they are innately God because they're part of God. But the thing about that type of realization is everyone's in that boat with you. Now, when these high-powered people who are using spirituality as an excuse to control the masses, they're taking the typical view of God as the singular being and trying to become that, so that there's still this vertical way of thinking where some of us are on top and some are on bottom.
Mm-hmm.
That has to go away if you want the cruelty in this world to go away.
Mm-hmm. It's exactly more of an egalitarian point that we are all one,
Yes.
essentially, and every person is a reflection of us. You know, every evil quality in someone else exists in us in some form, which is whether or not we choose to foster that and water that aspect of ourselves, or we want to instead water our good deeds and our better behavior, right, and our consideration and respect for others.
Yes, well, what this equality that we're offering through this new form of spirituality is a spirituality or a life view that's essentially free from fear. The reason that these people want to be on top is because they're afraid of being on bottom. So if you can get to them on that level, they've got to realize essentially that they're doing this because of fear.
Mm-hmm.
How powerful is fear?
Well, they say that there's two essential qualities in the world. There's love and there's fear, and you're driven by one or the other
Yes.
in your actions.
Yeah, and I had that choice. I think a lot of us have that choice in our life, and we get to decide which path we're going to go down. We either become harder because of the things we struggle from, or we become softer. One of them masquerades as bravery, masquerades as strength. The other one is true strength.
So given the context of the time we're in, where, you know, I think for a lot of people who were spiritually oriented, there was a certain excitement around 2012 that, you know, that we're entering the age of Aquarius finally, that, you know, things are going to be transformed. We will reach more connection and oneness, right?
Oh, I heard it all.
And here we are in 2014, and we're on the brink probably of world war, but we're definitely on the brink of conflict, and we're in the midst of a lot of turmoil and fear still. Do you think what we're going through is a necessary chaos, in a sense, a necessary conflict that will ultimately bring us towards that oneness? Or, you know, is it all just an illusion that we are really stuck in this hell and there's no way of getting out of this?
It's hell and there's no way of getting out of it, and we're just here to sedate you. No. Here's the thing about 2012 is that, I mean, you're in Los Angeles, you know how it is, especially in America. It's like nothing's changing unless there's explosions. Where's the spacecraft, right? That really was a major shift. But the way that I like to describe 2012 is it's almost like we were going up this, what would we call it, roller coaster. Now we're at the peak of the roller coaster at 2012, and now we're on this very fast ride. And so it was a very important turning point, both cosmically and within the human consciousness. Human consciousness is propelling itself right now in the direction of unity, in the direction of what a lot of us would conceptualize as utopia. Our whole society is on the brink of change. But the thing about this massive going in the direction of the new age, if you want to call it that, is that you're essentially pulling against all this resistance in the opposite direction. So what you're watching within the human consciousness, and this is mirrored in the human race, is that you're getting this major split. It's this dichotomy between the people that are awakening and the people who are holding on to the old paradigm. Now, what history shows about people who hold on to the old paradigm is they often die. If they're unable to move forward, that's the thing about progression. You either move forward or you reset. Now, when we say reset, that means you default back to source consciousness. You're no longer focused physically. So whether that takes the form of an enormous war or a huge pandemic, the Earth is going to cleanse itself of any vibration which does not match the new vibration.
Right. In terms of your vision of the future, does it come to you as an actual vision? Is it more of a sensation?
Oh, it's a vision, yes.
Do you see us basically, you know, a lot of talk is on this issue of transcending the human body, right? And that's, you know, whether or not we merge with computers and become cyborg-like, which I'm not a fan of. Whether we basically I don't know, if we get more light-based bodies and less fleshy material, you know, fleshy bodies. There is some transcendence that's coming in terms of our awareness of beyond ourselves, right? Is that what you see in terms of humans maintaining this current form, or do you see us entering a new, different state physically on this planet?
The human physicality will go through multiple evolutions. For example, our gender difference is going to disappear. But physicality is always going to be an option. This is the major key. As we transcend into a higher vibration, a higher consciousness, it will be an option to be physical or not. So you can either be focused physically or you can be focused non-physically in these multidimensional realities. So people will turn into living Buddhas, living Christs. That's basically what will happen. I could be focused there, or I could be focused here. The people who would like to sell you on the idea that our fleshy bodies are going to disappear and will be light bodies have an innate resistance to being physical. Right. Because they don't understand the beauty of the choice of it.
Right. There's always a place for that that physicality, because there are all these different realms.
Yeah, and if there wasn't, then there wouldn't be beings trying to get into physicality, which there is, I can tell you. The focus and the excitement and the non-physical realities is always towards physicality. When I'm down here and bogged in this density in life that you don't like, you're kind of going, why the hell would you want to do this? Why did I do this, in fact? But they're super interested in it. It's sort of like, I mean, here you are in this mirror hologram where you get to experience tangibly what your thoughts are. Now, all of you know, like, if you could strip away the negative aspects of looking at your shadow self in this mirrored reality, how do you put a price on the feeling of sex? How do you put a price on the feeling of, like, the best meal you've ever tasted?
And wasn't that what brought us here in the first place?
Yes.
Wasn't that the whole issue of what the snake represented in the Garden of Eden?
Yes.
Right? Was, oh, it's sex, it's physical, it's pleasure, right?
Yes.
And that was the break, right? To know, because we took the path of knowledge, which takes us into this physical form. But because you have to earn that knowledge, we're not given as much access to information, right? We've been kind of cut off from a lot of the information that obviously you're able to download. Now, where does this knowledge that you access come from? Do you know, like, do you know really its essence or its source?
Everywhere. I feel like if you understand a quantum universe, all thoughts that have ever been thought exist. For that reason, if you're a kind of person who's not limited by space or time because your consciousness is at that level, then you can receive any thought that's ever been thought. It's like question, answer. It's a perfect vibrational match.
Do you think this resonate? Is this a power that was evident within your bloodline, within ancestors of yours?
It's why I chose that particular bloodline, yes. Really what I chose is a physical body which can allow that information in. See, all people are multidimensional beings. All people are capable of all the spiritual gifts which I am exhibiting. But upon coming into certain genetics, I don't know if you've heard about genetics can be switched on or switched off. Now, science is basically on the brink of discovering this. The fact that mind is actually what dictates whether a certain gene is switched on or switched off. That's why one person manifests cancer and the other person doesn't, even though they're genetically identical. So I opted into a family line where certain portions of the brain and genetic codes were disabled, which disable me from being fully focused physically. It's almost like, in order to, think of this like a video game. Now, upon coming into life, you choose your avatar, right? And let's say that you were to switch off all of these lights in the room, which makes you totally focus on the video game. It's like when I came in here, I left a lot of them on, so I can also look around at the room. That's all.
Right, and that was your choice. In terms of the, you know, what you're describing as far as where we're going as a human race, it seems like some of the talk about what have been called aliens on this planet, often people say, look, the aliens are actually our future selves communicating, right? Because again, we're talking about star systems. Star systems are not in our present, they're in our past, and potentially they're in our future, right? But what is really the present is just, it's some kind of manifestation of the two, right, at this point.
Yes.
Is that what you think that you're drawing upon, is like a future, almost like a future projection into your current self? Almost a future self of yours that's projecting back into
Potentially.
this?
You could definitely argue that, yes.
Right. Just a possibility. So in terms of how people should live their life, I mean, if ultimately, does it matter what we do? I mean, if we're already on a trajectory or we're on a course, do our choices even matter?
It matters a great deal, because the future is never set. Every single thought that's thought today is pre-paving the future. It's why anybody can read the future at all. So me, I'm a person who basically reads futures off of people. So if I'm sitting here with you across the table, I'm only able to see what you're a vibrational match to. If you were to change one modality of thinking, then your future life paths would change. The only reason that we could guess what goes on in your future with any reasonable accuracy is that the majority of people don't change the way they're thinking. They wake up at 9 o'clock. They go to their crappy job they can't stand. They call their relatives. They watch their kids. That's basically what they do all day long. They're not asking these really enormous questions, and they're sure as hell not aware of what their mind does in terms of their reality. But the minute that a person becomes aware that their mind might have something to do with the way they're living, all bets are off. The future's changed so quickly that you couldn't bet on them if you wanted to. So yes, every thought you're thinking prepaves your reality. It's one of the main reasons I want to be talking to people on a mass scale in general, because this fatalism doesn't serve us, nor is it in alignment with universal truth. We are creating our reality, choice by choice and focus by focus. It's another reason why shows like this need to exist, because if you watch the news, I mean, I can't watch it for 15 minutes without wanting to kill myself, frankly, because it's so depressing.
Right.
And with that focus, we are creating the very things which we are making everyone
But it's
focus
depressing
on.
for a different reason. For example, we can talk here about things that are horrifying, that are terrible. You know, things that involve ritual abuse. That involve we talk about corruption. We talk about lies, conspiracy, right? Hypocrisy, corruption,
Yes.
and yet it's not. But it's always with the intention of trying to make people more aware.
Exactly. So it's
So
the
they can
intention that
change
matters.
they can change their behavior.
Yeah.
They can change their attitudes. They can change their thought patterns.
So what's the intention of mainstream media, do you think?
The mainstream media's intention? To sell things.
Very nice.
To sell products.
There we go.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much designed, and actually that's what most film is now about, television shows. It's about selling, clothing and telling you that you have freedom to choose. Oh, we have a free country. America's such a free country, and yet, really the freedom is, do I want to buy Nike? Do I want to buy Reebok?
Yeah.
Do I want to buy Kim Kardashian? Do I want to buy,
Yes.
you name it, some other reality TV show?
Yes.
And that's what they call freedom now. And they'll enforce your freedom with the machine gun, enforce you to be free, right? Until if you don't like these two options, then guess what? You should pay more taxes, or you should go to jail, or try to do something in the alternative realm, and see if you can find some viewership.
Yep.
But why don't you think? Why, if we're past this 2012 point, isn't the awakening happening more quickly?
Oh my gosh, it is. I think it is.
Yeah.
I think most cameras aren't fixated on that particular fact. But in my travels, this year specifically and especially, I can tell you that we are awakening at an amazing rate.
Mm-hmm.
It's blowing my mind, in fact. And seeing the younger generation especially has been amazing, because it's like they're stepping in with the expanded consciousness that has been laid out before them by previous generations.
I see that with the kids especially, the intelligence that is in their eyes, that that exudes something that their parents don't understand. They have no idea about. Their parents say, "Here, play with this iPad. I don't know what to do with you," right? But the kids are, in a sense, the ones that'll be inheriting what we're creating now, whatever we're doing. So but your point is about this conflict that's coming.
Yes.
Do you think that we are in for some tremendous conflict because there has to be a certain harvesting, in a sense, or a cleansing that has to take place?
I don't like using the word has to, because it's always a choice within the human race, but as far as what I see from my particular position, what we're in for is unlike any horror that we've ever seen. I think we're gearing up for the next massive world conflict, and I think that the human race will be cleansed. Because at this point, we're not playing with small guns, are we?
Yeah, not at all. And, well, not even just guns, but chemical weapons, and we're playing with the atmosphere. We're not talking about climate change, we're talking about what they're doing with the geoengineering. I mean, are we dealing with an alien force on this planet?
Yes, we are. I think most people who are super conscious understand that the humans are not the only one in this particular game.
Mm-hmm. But the problem is that it's difficult because we all look human.
Yeah, well,
That's the hard part.
that's
right?
the other thing too. It's like if you've been raised on Hollywood movies, you're waiting for somebody who looks like an alien to walk through the door, but a multidimensional being, which most extraterrestrial beings are, they're not going to walk through the front door looking like an alien, are they?
They're gonna look human.
Yes.
But are these the real rulers of this planet,
Yes.
of an alien race, and they're hostile to humans?
Yes.
So ultimately, we're in a position where either humans have to wake up and reject it, or survive the conflict that they're creating.
This is where other extraterrestrial beings come into play. But essentially, it's always a choice for you to align with that or to not align with it, because everything in this universe, extraterrestrial or not, is still governed by the same universal laws. We're talking non-physical laws that go way beyond them.
Mm-hmm.
So if humanity wakes up to these types of other laws, starts to use them, starts to use the power of their own mind, then they can become exempt from this control system.
Mm-hmm. So what laws are we talking about? The law of allowance, right?
Yes.
The law of attraction?
Yes.
The law of balance?
I'm not a super fan of that particular concept. Law of attraction is the number one that I would say most of us are aware of it loosely. I mean, The Secret did a really bad job of explaining that particular.
I think it did, because I always say law of attraction, but opposites attract. So if I'm
They
thinking,
never attract.
Huh? But
Opposites never attract.
in magnetics they do.
Only, so this is interesting. So if you look at something, I'm going to explain this to you. This will be fun. Okay, so when you look at like you and me, right? We are not one singular vibration. Our point of desire is also a very strong vibration. Mm-hmm. And so that's what's becoming a match. So if I am purely positive, I'm so polar basically that I am desiring the opposite. Did I say I was negative? So if I'm negative, basically I'm desiring positive.
Okay.
You're positive.
So I desire negative.
Yeah. So actually, that is your vibration. Now that's becoming a match. So your desire for negative, I am negative. That's the match. Mm-hmm. That's the only reason why we think in the physical dimension that negatives or the opposites attract. It's because we don't understand that desire is actually a point of attraction that exists within us.
Right. So that itself is that is a pole around which we all operate.
Yes.
So aside from law of attraction, you have obviously law of allowance, which we talked about. What are the other key points?
There are some other ones, but none of them are as important as the law of attraction because of the fact that the law of attraction basically states that anything that you are focused on, anything you're vibrating at, you become a match to. Mm-hmm. So if we are continually watching these things about pandemics without the intention, of course, of becoming more aware and doing something about it, you make yourself more of a match to it. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly how these systems, powers that be, basically, that's how they're getting us into this basket in accordance with the law of attraction. They're not breaking any universal rules doing what they're doing.
No, they always have to advertise it. Mm-hmm. So they always tell you what they're doing. Yeah. It's usually done through like film,
yes.
occasionally through certain media, mm-hmm. right? But but also, I mean, so you're saying that in a certain sense they lower the vibration by fixating on it. So they'll create, for example, let's focus on Ebola, and let's tell people Ebola's out there again, right? Well, Ebola's been around for 20 years. I remember the first scare in '94. But now let's focus on Ebola because they're ultimately going to lower in a certain way, in our certain capacity, they can lower our immune systems. They're going to
mm-hmm.
lower our overall protection because we're aware of it and scared of it, mm-hmm. as opposed to promoting a feeling of being immune.
Yes.
Right. So they want us to be fearful.
Yes.
And that's how they get us. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, that's exactly how they get it. And also, so like, let's look on a universal scale. A lot of people want to ask, okay, well, if this stuff is going on and let's say good extraterrestrials know about it, why aren't they parachuting themselves down here and saving everyone?
Right.
It's because in higher dimensional realities, you thinking thoughts that vibrate at a victim mentality means you're inviting a perpetrator. It's an invitation, the same as me saying, come to dinner. So mm-hmm. you're not breaking any laws.
Right.
You chose it. Whether the physical human consciously understands that they chose it or not, on a higher dimensional level, you chose it.
And that's what they perpetuated, right?
Oh, yeah.
Is this whole victim mentality within as we know, within our society. It's the litigious kind of Roman Empire where everything is predicated on laws and if lawsuits and whatnot. No one has responsibility anymore. No one takes responsibility for themselves.
Yes.
Let alone their family, let alone their neighborhood or society at large.
And we know what happened to Rome.
We do. So in terms of the lack of, let's say, like the alien positive force, does it operate mainly through people, through
they
people
work
of
the same way that the negative people do. Let's try to get people to focus on something which makes them not invite those things into their reality and invite the opposite instead. Being
love, being connection.
Yes. Empathy.
Things that raise your overall
authenticity,
vibration.
Yeah.
How does the chakra system play into that?
The chakra system, that was a leap in subject matter.
Is it? I'm just thinking in terms of the overall vibration, right? We talk normally, it's from the heart, the throat, the crown, the third eye. Yeah. These are usually considered like the higher vibrations, right? Vibrational states that people want to attain to. Most people operate, for the most part, the lower chakras.
Yes, and
sex,
I disagree with it, though.
Right.
I'm like one of the people who really likes to talk about the fact that we in the spiritual community, this irritates me a lot, I have to tell you. The fact that we like to say that all of these are non-spiritual and all of these are spiritual.
Not at all.
But that's the thing in spiritual communities.
Yeah.
let's get up here. But the thing is that when each one of our chakras contains an exalted form. So the exalted form of being physical is the base chakra in its highest light. The exalted form of the sacral chakra is the holy union. The exalted form of this, your identity chakra, essentially,
The sun,
yeah, solar plexus, is you coming into your full authenticity and power. So we could keep going up and up and up and up. So what this looks like for us in terms of this huge shift that we're making is that we will find the exalted form of each one of our points of manifestation within our universe. We will become more physical, but the right kind of physical. We will become more sexual, but the right kind of sexual.
Right.
You see?
I'm sure a lot of viewers will be freaked out, but it's important to talk about these things. And then the fact that they're poisoning the food supply. And obviously they polluted the mind. I mean, the point is we've gone from sexuality or sexuality to pornography for the most part. We've gone from, you know, idea of eating from farms, from farm-based foods to Monsanto-generated GMOs and whatnot. So it's the ideas across the board, they are trying to toxify what we're consuming.
They're trying,
physical form.
Yes, and they're trying to get rid of connection. The number one thing that I'm watching in the modern world is the desecration of intimacy. Intimacy is a connection innately with something. So sexually, there's no connection when you're masturbating to something on TV. And mentally, there's no mental connection with other people if all your mental stimulation is happening online.
If it's happening on, well, exactly.
Yeah.
And you're not even having the time to absorb it because you're already browsing between the next Twitter feed and the next alert, you know, news alert or whatnot. There's no time to actually sit and even have a discussion like this. That's what the point of shows like this are about, having conversations. People can actually listen and hear it, and they don't hear a news clip that boils down to 2 minutes, and then they're going to interrupt you halfway through your thought and jump to the next thing, which is, okay, now where's the next terror alert? And, you know, how do we stop ISIS? I was watching this funny Miss America thing where, what's his name? The British comedian on HBO last week with, I'm blanking on his name. But anyway, John Oliver makes a point about Miss America, and he says, you know, what are we doing with these questions we're asking Miss America contestants? You know, in 20 seconds, can you please summarize how we should respond to ISIS? You know, the poor Miss America contestants, you know, being thrown these questions. It's just a joke. Yeah. Our level of intellect is a complete farce. If we have these two trends that are converging, right? That's really what it boils down to. That's where the conflict comes. Are we looking at a certain time period, that, like the next 2 years? We need to watch basically these next 2 years are integral for the future of mankind. Well, or do you think that is that alarmist?
The reason that I say 2 years is because it's already been done. I mean, the thing about most of what you see in mainstream media or any media is that most of the stuff you're hearing about is already years in the making. I mean, these, like for example, our government has known that our financial institution is done for. They've known the dollar is going to collapse for years. Years upon years upon years. Well, so we're going to hear about it.
It's in the very root of the financial system they created. Let's be honest, it was based on a borrowing system, monetary system from the private bank. It can never be sustained indefinitely, right? So the question, so you're saying that this will come, you think it will come to its head in these next 2 years. Will Obama be our last president?
There is a potential, actually.
What do you see him as? Do you see him as, like, there's a reason he was chosen for this role?
Well, a lot of people are going to disagree with my particular view, but I think a lot of people that get into the presidency, even though they are heavily groomed for it, do not know what they're getting in for. The president is a figurehead. Everyone behind the presidency is the one that's actually dictating our government. Sure. He's a puppet.
He is a puppet. But he was chosen for that. I mean, to be this, to play, we're talking about an end time scenario, right? To play the president of the United States at this point, it's very particular, it seems to me.
Yes.
You know, but why him?
Why do you think him?
I don't think he's entirely human.
That's a very easy answer. Well, yeah.
No, I mean, I wouldn't say the same thing about Bush or Clinton.
Yeah.
I think there's something other about him that strikes me. You know, and I mean, you talk about the overall. Well, I mean, how does this Baphomet agenda play into it then? Because you mentioned the idea that the future entails a merging of masculine and feminine bodies, right? But that's very much the Baphomet figure, right? The idea of the male-female and with the goat head, right? With the female breasts, masculine bottom. It's some kind of merged humanity.
Yes.
So you're saying is that the negative agenda or the positive, or is it just
Positive
the natural?
agenda. The negative would be forced.
Mm-hmm.
The positive would be natural.
Well, it is forced. Maleficent. She was Baphomet on the cover.
Well, you really want to get super outside the box? Socialism is not forced, nor can it ever be. Communism is forced. So we're looking at two ideas which are very similar in agenda, but one is enforced, therefore cannot really be true socialism. The other one can only be an organically grown type of a thing. I mean, you cannot create a socialism in a society if there is even one person that wants control. So that has to be the natural byproduct of individual beings all coming awake and coming alive.
Right. Well, I mean, talking about socialism in the context of like a natural society, like for example, ants have their social order.
Yeah.
All animals have their social order.
Yeah.
But we don't quite yet know what human social order seems to be.
Yeah, we can't agree.
We can't seem to agree on that, right?
Yes, but that's the same thing where it's like when there could be a forced there's no more gender, or there could be just a natural progression of the polarity dissipating within our race.
Mm-hmm. What about cloning? This whole question of whether or not cloning is being implemented
Oh,
on
it's being implemented.
certain people in public
Yes.
public positions, people like, you know, Obama, let's say.
Cloning is a reality.
What's the purpose though? Because the clone is more easily controllable, it doesn't have a soul.
No, it does have a soul. It's impossible to be physically mobile and not have a soul. You couldn't actually have something focused physically that wasn't focused from another dimensional reality.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, it depends on what we consider a soul. Because, for example, the soul level of a plant or a rock is much lower than that of, let's say, a human.
I disagree.
Really?
Yes. Yeah, I don't, the hierarchy is that's another human thing. People love to think that the people and that consciousness is the highest. And also we like to make judgments about intellect and of course have intellect associated with consciousness. But it's all different perspectives. It's sort of like if you were to take one huge pie, let's call the universe this pie, you were to separate it out in all these different pieces and then say that one piece is more important than the other piece.
Mm-hmm.
And I will get aggressive. Let's call one piece a daisy that's growing in your front yard. Let's call the other piece you. These are two different perspectives, two living organisms. One is not more important than the other. Because all of the consciousness that's coming from these living beings is informing source consciousness about what it is and what to become.
Right.
All of these perspectives is causing
Well, we
universal
need it.
expansion.
We know we are what we eat, right? We need the food.
Yes.
We need. We depend upon these things that we don't necessarily. We take them for granted, let's say, right? But we don't realize that no, that's actually what makes up this physical body, which then feeds our consciousness.
Yes. Or the consciousness feeds the physical body.
And that's, well, then what is consciousness? I mean, are we dealing with something that's obviously not in our body, right?
Oh, it is. Your body is it.
It's a reflection of it.
It's it in a physical form.
In a physical form, yes. But that's not all, because it's linked by what? The silver cord?
That's what it would. It's what it would observe. You'd
Look
observe
like a
it that
silver
way,
cord.
yeah.
But then where does the astral self exist? Does it exist?
Here, this
Out.
is the thing. That's yet again the brain thing.
Mhm.
We got to do the layers, right?
Yeah.
Which actually don't exist. This multidimensional reality is in and of us. It's like all of these layers are merged. It's just where are we focusing?
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Exactly, your focus, your intention, and the way of being in the world.
There is no separation between your soul and your body, none whatsoever.
So what are things that people could do really to attain more to that level of awareness, to be focused on the right things? What I mean, aside from obviously awakening to shows like this that give them a different perception of reality, what are things that they can do in their common life?
I could sum the number one thing up in about 2 seconds. They could care what they feel more than anything else. If you want to talk connection to the thing which you're not perceiving, most people in physical life are not perceiving, which is your eternal self. The one connection you have is your emotional self.
Mm-hmm.
And we tune it out, we drug it out, We do whatever we can to separate ourselves from that aspect of our being, but it is literally the reflection of your being. So
Yeah.
if I had one wish when it came to people waking up, it would be that they decide, because it's a decision, to care more how they feel than they care about anything else. That means I care how I feel so much that I can't be in this job that I hate anymore. If you're in a job you hate, you are disconnected from your eternal self. You can't do that and not get sick. They would be making their decisions on a day-to-day basis based on what felt good.
Yeah. But that's an interesting thing, because a lot of people have misconstrued the nature of feeling as sensation, and which has been oftentimes based on behavioral type of science. It's been conditioned, right? So the sensation of, if it, you know, of our how do you say, our programming has given us certain sensations of how to respond to things that are not necessarily authentic.
Give me an example.
For example, what you told me about being in that you know, in that early condition,
Yes.
you know, being abused, you didn't necessarily know that you didn't like it. Not like it, but you didn't know that there was something wrong.
That's the thing. I think at our deepest level, there is an aspect of you that never goes away, that regardless of conditioning, does say that it's wrong.
Yeah, I'm not saying it ever goes away, but I'm saying that I think most people are living in that state right now, that they've been abused, mentally, emotionally abused
Yes.
by society.
Yes.
That's so sick.
Yes.
That they think it's normal to be that way. And then when they find sometimes that light or that thing that triggers, they either wake up or they get even more scared and run away, and they say, "That's you're the alien. You and I are nuts for talking about what we're talking about.
yeah.
How dare we, right?"
Yeah.
Because that's the conditioning that kicks in.
Yes.
And so I think what you're saying is the absolute most important thing that can be said. It's don't look at the situation through your eyes. You know, like Jesus said, find that third eye, find that singular eye, which is internal, which is your feeling and feel your way through the world, and don't look at, you know, what the eye candy is telling you, what your ears are telling you, what the media is telling you, the president's telling you is the right thing to do. Everyone else is influencing constantly, and we're not trusting our inner self
Yes.
to, as you said, be who we are, follow what feels right to us.
That's scary, because you have to be authentic to do that, and most people are not willing to. I mean, to be authentic means you have to admit to your shadow aspects, not just your light aspects. I mean, we're in the perfect city to talk about that, because everyone's running around trying to get liposuction or something in order to be what they think they should be. But that's what creates the rift between conscious and subconscious in the first place, is the idea that there's some aspects of the self that are acceptable and some aspects of the self that are unacceptable. So now when I'm feeling these unacceptable things, I can't admit to it. I have to drug them out with Percocet or go watch porn, or like we could just feel
Of course, find a comfort zone to not have to deal, basically to check
yeah.
out. And that's what most people want to do, right?
Exactly.
They want to go home and they want to check out.
Yeah,
Just turn-
so if we want to get back in tune with our emotional selves, we have to be willing to admit to some very unsavory truths. Super unsavory truths.
Then that's really what the leap is about then.
Yes.
So this, whatever is coming, ideally will force us to see our shadows and to
Yeah.
make peace with them, right?
That is the choice.
It's a tremendous mission. So people can normally follow you on YouTube. You've got the Ask Teal show on a weekly basis.
Yes, I do. Every Saturday I release a new video. People submit their questions. I choose the one that resonates the most with collective consciousness. And then I answer it in video format every Saturday.
One final question. What do you remember being like your first extrasensory experience, let's say? Do you have a recollection of the first memory or the first inclination in that regard?
No, because I came in this way. More, it was like the first memory of realizing that what I see is not the same as what other people see. It was when I was walking around, I was in my school setting, and the desks themselves, they project, depending on what material they're made with, and they used to be made with organic materials, they would project this big auric field around them, and I have a little bit of a difficult time with physical versus non-physical. I would like run into walls and stuff like that when I was younger, because thinking that I could go through them. So I was taking the long way around these desks in this really bizarre pattern. Of course, my teacher sat down with me and said, "Why are you doing that?"
Yeah.
I tried to explain it to her, and she sent me to the principal's office. So that was me going, "Oh no, obviously I have to figure out what the right way to behave here is," because I'm in my own little sub-reality. Yeah.
It's okay. I've been called the same. And you know what? We're creating our own world. I think I'd rather be living in the reality that I'm creating than the one that's been imposed upon me. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Because it's pretty nasty out there.
Yeah, it is.
But thank you for doing the work you're doing, and for joining us.
Thank you.
And definitely, we'll have people check out your page. I'm sure they already have. They're familiar with you. But we'll definitely keep following and seeing what insights you come with, because
Okay.
this is, as you said, this is a very exciting time in human history.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Well, there you have it, folks. Teal Swan, an amazing spirit and soul. And as she says, the heart of the matter really is the human heart. Feel your way through your reality and recognize what you are, a co-creator of all of this with us. This is Sean Stone signing off.